All right, today we are going to be talking about the orphan quilt blocks and orphan projects that we have laying around. So we're going to discover a few ways and explore what actually is an orphan quilt block or a project if you're not familiar with that yet. Both the orphan quilt block and the orphan project, they both have their own little story and purpose. And no matter what they are, we'll learn how we can get them moving forward. For this little series, it's not about necessarily finishing it, but it's about moving forward and getting maybe a little bit more interested in it to the point where you're continually working on it. Unless there's a real purpose to it, and usually the deadlines help us get things done. I've always been one that feels like working on them is actually just as good as finishing them. So the longer the time we take to actually get back to the project or the block, the harder it becomes to work on them. The interest no longer there, the fire and desire to work on them fizzles to like nothing, leaving us with guilt. Can you have guilt about a quilt project? Yes. And no desire whatsoever to touch them again. So moving forward on these orphan projects is the best thing that we can do. Taking small steps, gathering our supplies, pulling them from the back to the front of the shelf, using tracking sheets, which I'll talk about later, picking specific maybe days, times of the weeks to work on them. Whatever the progress is, it's better than nothing. So while the end result is being completed is awesome, sometimes those small little steps is just as important and the only reason why it actually does get finished. So let's talk about what is an actual orphan quilt block. So I'm going to grab my pile right here. It is a block that at some point you have sewn together and it's not finished into a project. So for whatever the reasons or, the decisions you've made to not finish it or to not include it in your quilt, whatever it is, they are just without a home. They have no purpose. I have a drawer in my sewing room that houses all of my orphan blocks. So we just tuck them away in a box, in a drawer, in a pile in the corner, on the shelf, behind, of course, all our other quilt blocks or projects we're working on, and with random bits and fabrics. Basically, it's like kind of lost and forgotten. So orphan quilt blocks aren't necessarily bad. They are sometimes just the leftovers of exploring colors, ideas, designs, techniques, and practicing. Some come with maybe a specific quilt or project. Others are just, like I said, practice pieces. So for whatever reason, they've been left alone, but not really, because they are typically in a pile with other random quilt blocks. So they are alone, but in a collection. What is an orphan project? So this is something that's larger. It's not just single blocks left alone. This is a whole project or a whole quilt that you have abandoned, basically. Sits again on an unfinished in a bag, box, Ziploc, containers, stacked on the shelf in a pile that's so precarious you don't want to walk by or sneeze by it. You've got good intentions to completing it, but usually something or another has happened and the finishing it has come to a complete stop. So here are a couple reasons. Wasn't maybe what you envisioned. It's not moving in the right direction, not the right colors, not your favorite anymore. You found something else that's a little more funner or more interesting for you to do. You pushed it aside to an urgent project, of course, because some of those take precedence when they have a deadline. It doesn't spark your interest. It's blank many years, so we won't count how many years old our projects are. But for someone, it's just, it was just not finished. So some may even say that these orphan projects hold like a certain guilt to them as well. When you look at them, you feel guilty. Oh, I should be working on that, but you don't. In reality, you may even feel guilty because you ended up finishing it. But because for whatever reason, it's so late and you don't actually give it or you don't feel accomplished because of that. So here's the thing we need to remember. Orphan projects are usually something you came up with. So it was for a certain purpose, whatever the purpose is. Doesn't really matter at this point. Release the guilt and decide if it really is a project that you want to actually spend time on and possibly complete. If it is, then that's where you start. I say, forget about the end result, like giving it as a gift to so-and-so or whatever else you had planned for it. Forget that. Just try to move forward. If at the end of the project you think that you could still use it for its original purpose, then go right ahead. But don't feel guilty about it if your actions change upon completion. So over the next little bit, we'll go over some ways of like dealing with those orphan projects, quilt blocks, how to keep them organized, reigniting the excitement about them again, and what to do when we just don't want to work on them at all or ever finish it, because that happens too. And really, that's okay. So I'd love to hear what the story is behind your orphan quilt blocks or projects that you have. And what's the plan for them that you have for the future? And if you're ready to move forward, I'd love to hear about it. Drop those stories in the comments. I'm excited to hear from you. If you'd like more information about getting your projects done and your orphan quilt block projects, and maybe that tracker or other ideas that you need or help to get those things finished or getting going again, you can stop by patchworkposse.com and search for Orphan Project Challenge, where we will send you an email series all about orphan projects and helping you jumpstart them again.